Alright, continuing on with the build, and now we're on to the main frame portion of the build. What I got here is basically on page 5 and 6 of the manual are all the parts that will combine or attach the two frames together. Now, before you do this step, I would recommend that you sand, wet sand actually, all the edges of the frame, all the carbon fiber edges inside as well of these holes. So the reason you do that is so when you have wires on the model, they don't get cut up on the edges of the carbon fiber. They are fairly sharp out of the from the factory. So what I do is I run water on a faucet and sand it all the way around, with 220 grit. I mean, finer sandpaper is fine as well, but obviously it's more work. But anyways, this has been sanded. Everything's nice and smooth. You could also get a Dremel, like a little grinding barrel, and run it on the edge of the frame, the carbon fiber. That also helps. Make sure you wear a mask when you do that, as carbon fiber particles will definitely fly all over. So I'll go ahead and start putting this together. I don't see anything unusual with this build. It's pretty straightforward. The key here is once you put all the items together, do not tighten anything. Everything will be loose and flimsy. Just put the screws in, no Loctite for now. But go ahead and clean your screws in alcohol before putting in them loosely. You will be tightening it later on top of when the main shaft's inserted, so everything's square. But right now everything will be kind of loosely attached. Okay, just a note, on page 5 of the manual, as it shows you to install the canopy mounts, as I took them out of the bag, I noticed that there are two lengths on the canopy post. The shorter ones have a marker. It says F on it, and the other one doesn't. And usually the F, well, that's for front. The shorter ones usually go up front. So I just wanted to highlight that when you install them on the frame. So as I'm putting together the frames, so far I only have the two posts there, two posts, and they're loose for now. Canopy post. Looking at the bottom frame piece here, there is an angle. Let me show it on. As you can see, there is a screw that is angled like this, and that points to the top. So I would just want to highlight that. Basically, this is where the skids will be bolting on. So you mount this like this on the frame with these screws pointing up. Okay, just wanted to highlight that, and we will move along. Okay, so I'm on page 6 of the manual. Also something I wanted to highlight. So the bearing blocks right here, there's a difference. This is the bottom one, and the way you can tell is there's no screw in the back. This is the screws, which identifies the top one. And what that is for is basically for this, for the swash guide. So just wanted to highlight that. Some people might ask, well, what's the orientation of the bearings? Because one side obviously is where the bearing's inserted, the other side, it doesn't go through. It doesn't really matter, but from years of experience, I tend to put the top out like this. That way, if you have to replace them after a crash, you don't have to pull the entire thing out. Sometimes you could just heat it up a little bit and it'll pop right out. And then on the bottom one, I tend to put it upside down so it just goes right through if I need to work on them. So basically I'm gonna put it with this top and like this bottom. Okay? Okay, so here is the frames and everything on page 5, 6, and 7 basically installed. The reason I counted 7 is because I installed the tail belt guide before I do the step of tightening everything down. So right now everything is loose, all the screws are loose, and that's in preparation for aligning the entire frame to make sure everything is square before tightening it down. So I said earlier I didn't put Loctite on this. It's because when I'm doing the build video I don't get to breeze through a build, but I kind of have to take step by steps while I shoot the video. So what I'm gonna do now is basically insert the main shaft like so, and then place the frames on a really flat surface, like maybe a glass table or something like that. And of course Loctite, put Loctite on all the screws, then go ahead and start tightening them down. You know, this assures everything will be square and 90, and the frames will be true. Alright, so that's it for this step, and we will continue. Okay, so here is the frames with all the screws Loctited and tightened down. And the steps that I did was without the skids. I just put them on just now before I started shooting again. But without the skids, place the model on a flat surface, very flat surface. Insert the main shaft, and while everything's nice and square, I tighten down the screws, you know, from top to bottom as I go. And I don't really have a specific reason why I went in that order, but the result was great. So you can see the main shaft just slides perfectly. Everything's 90 and true. So that was a great result. The kits, I mean, the kit build, the quality of the parts is amazing. This thing is nice. So after I tightened the frames, I went ahead and installed the landing gear per page 6 of the manual. It came with these, the landing gear came with these rubber protectors. It has adhesive inside. I won't be using them. It's an optional item, but I won't be using them because I tend to do a lot of sliding stuff with my models. So here it is, looking great, building really fast. I'm actually shocked how fast everything is going together, even while I'm shooting this video. Alright, so we're basically on page 7 of the manual. The next steps are basically the belt. It looks like on page 8 we're going to be doing the gears and the motors. So we will continue. So for page 8 of the manual, we are going to be installing the swash guide, you know, which goes over here. Pretty straightforward. We're also installing the belt and the main gear. Now on the manual it says to take this apart, let me see here. I already did actually to check this out because I'm pretty sure that was the case. To take this out, these 6 screws, and put Loctite on them. But I just checked right now before I started recording, and there is already Loctite on these on the 5 screws. So no need for any work here then. You just basically install it straight out, and the next portion is on the same page, is installing the motor with the motor mount. You can use, I'm not sure what you're going to be using. The kit is provided with a 11 tooth pinion, which probably comfortably will spin about 23 to 2500 RPM head speed. There is also an optional 12 tooth pinion for higher head speeds. I'm estimating it'll be about 2700 to 2800. And the part number is BLH 4918. So that's the 12 tooth pinion option. You will need to purchase this separately. For the motor, before you mount it, per page 8, I would recommend that you do your soldering now. Solder your motor connectors. These are the connectors that came with the Talon 90 speed control. Now you also want to solder your battery connector, and I already did so here. And just, these are the things you're going to be soldering for the kit, so I might as well do them all together. Okay, so I will go ahead and solder this first, just so everything is kind of lined up when we start shooting the installation on the heli. It'll just go much smoother. Okay, so we're going to install the belt per step F5. So all you do is put the belt between the belt guides right there, just through, and then go ahead and pick up your main gear, put the belt right through, then lift the main gear and just go in. Okay, there it goes. Now you will need, let me see if I can get this right, you will need to align the hole and then make sure you push the sleeve in. Right there, there's the hole, and spin the main shaft until you see the hole. There it is. So make it easier to line things up, just insert an Allen wrench. Yep, there it goes. Bolt just drops in, and all you do is put the other half in. No Loctite needed, so let me do that. Okay, that's it for the belt. I'll go ahead and attach the swash guide, basically right through here. So what I have here now is the motor all soldered up, and put some heat shrink tubing on the side there. It gives me a little bit of a place to grip the plugs when I'm pulling it out of. Let me show you. When you plug it into the ESC, if you pull it without this, the sleeves, the silicone tends to back off, move back. So that gives it a nice anchor point. Also cleans it up as well. So I did the soldering there, mounted the motor mount, and on the motor mount there's a side that has a bevel on the edge right there. The other side doesn't have it. It's just all flat. I looked at the manual and it shows that the bevel side's on top, even though it doesn't describe it. Use the supplied bolts, and make sure if you do use your own motor, when you install the motor mount, please make sure that it does not touch the windings inside. Being this is a super combo, everything's perfect. Length of the bolts to the motor is perfect. So Loctite that, clean. Make sure the threads are nice and clean and Loctite. Pinion. This is the 11-tooth pinion. I'm gonna start and try it with this pinion first. I measured it. You know, the height of the pinion. It's a fairly big area where you can install it. So I just opted to push the pinion just down right by the motor mount. You know, where I can comfortably still tighten the 2 set screws right there. And make sure you clean that and Loctite it. Anyways, this is ready to mount. And on the manual, you mount it, motor leads to the front. So you would install it here, and then these plates go outside. Just leave them loose for now, as you'll need to kind of slide and mesh the motor with the main gear. Okay, so motor is loose. You're able to slide so you see you can slide the motor you know, forward and back. And what I typically do is just basically slide this all the way in and then back it off a little bit so you can feel a little bit of play on the main gear. You can also do the paper technique. I know if you heard that. That's basically where you insert a piece of paper in between the 2 motor mounts. I mean the gear mesh. Push the motor in, then tighten it. That works as well. But for me, I'll just go ahead and do this by feel. Done this so many times. Like so. Perfect. So got a little bit of play between pinion and main gear. That should be good to go. Now the next step is battery plate, which we will mount the bracket of the Talon 90 underneath and just snap this in place. So I finished mounting the Talon 90 battery, ESC bracket on the bottom of the battery plate. So the way it looks like is, here's the battery plate, the logo's on top, bracket mounts on the bottom, 4 screws, and this just snaps into place. There you go. What I'll do next is insert the battery straps on these 2 locations right here, plug in the motor, and then just install this in place. I'm not worried about the motor where I plug it into, because the good thing about having Castle software is you can just plug it into your Castle link. If it rotates the wrong way, you don't have to swap the motor wires. All you have to do is, on the software, just change the direction. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do that now, install this on the heli. Okay, so I've mounted the ESC battery, the ESC underneath the battery plate onto the frame. Only thing I want to highlight here is the connection from the ESC that will be going to the flybarless system that will be here in the back. I decided to route it through here, and which means it will need a servo extension. So What I have here is a servo extension, 6-inch servo extension. I might be able to go with a 3, but this is what I had in hand. The servo extension I use is a heavy-duty servo extension, and what that means is basically the wire gauge is thicker than your standard servo extension. It's actually the same thickness as the one that comes with the castle. So the reason I am highlighting this is because we want to make sure that the current that it's able to put out the castle, you don't lose it through smaller wires with the servo extension. Now this BEC was designed to output 20 amps of power, which is pretty significant. I don't even see that would be possible with this setup. It should be the servos that Spectrum creates are very efficient in power, so I don't think it's a big deal. But nevertheless, it's kind of a safety thing for me, kind of a peace of mind thing. So I am using what they call a heavy-duty servo connector. Okay, so that's really all it is that I wanted to highlight for this. And now the next step is connecting. Basically, on the manual is to install the servos onto the frame. Now you want to take this opportunity to basically do 90 on your servo arms now. So it's easier when you have them in there, when all servos are in there. It's really you'll end up pulling the servos again to put them on 90. So you want to do it now. So basically my next step is, since the ESC is set at 6 volts already from the factory, I'm gonna go ahead and create my model now for on my radio, which is I don't really want to go in detail, but your basic let me see if I can show it here. It's your basic heli model with swash plate type of normal. And all the other flight mode settings. But for this step, you just want normal. And you will bind it to your Spectrum AR7210BX. After you bind it, you can plug it here, and you basically power up the model. So I'll start doing that and start just setting these at 90, and we'll continue. Okay, so here we got the Spectrum powered up, the 7210 powered up. Here's the radio. And what I'm going to do right now is this little manual, the menu overview for the 7210. I started marking out some things basically for the setting. So, for example, first we got to go into the setup menu, which is you would hold the button till it goes solid. There it goes. And it's on parameter A. So on the setup menu, parameter A is the mounting orientation. I'll be mounting this horizontal with sockets up front. And that basically says put the status light to off. Right now it is off, but to change it, when the radio is bouncy, you change the rudder and it changes the mode. See, so blue solid, that means horizontal, inverted, socket back, so on and so forth. But for option A, I want this to be off. So there. Now we go to option B, which is the swash plate servo frequency, and right now it says purple, and that's 50 Hertz. For these servos, we want to set to 200 Hertz, so we want that solid blue. There you go. Then rudder, we want it at 1520, which is also solid blue. For C, that's solid blue right there. And then rudder servo frequency, D, we want it at 333, which is blue flashing. There you go. So that sets all the frequency of the servos. So the other options like E, we won't care for now because that's the servo endpoint, so on and so forth. H is the swash plate mixer, so that's 120. I'll go ahead and set that. That's red solid. Yep, that's how it is set. And then, basically what we need to go to is G, which is swash plate servo centering, which I passed. So you will need to get out of the menu by going all the way and re-enter by holding down the button. Okay, so there on G, that is what's going to be used to center the servos. Okay, so also want to highlight channel. It says on the 7210, channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4. Basic channel 1 is elevator. It's also on the manual for the controller. Channel 2 is what they call aileron, and channel 3 is pitch, which is just the other side, the right side of the servo. And then channel 4 is tail. So the way this is going to work right now is if you move the sticks, the servo that you're going to be changing will pulsate. Right now that's pulsating for that. So this is first one, second one, third one. Okay then. Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and center. It looks like channel 3 is the first one. When you move it, should like wiggle. Okay, it did. And on the manual, it's like 9 o'clock, so it's like this. Okay, so you want to try and get it close to 90 as possible, and when it's a little off, you do adjustments through the radio. See there, up and down. So you just want to make sure that it's 90 with the servo case. I'm just gonna set that. That looks good. Actually, you know what? This would be easier if I install all the servo arms so I can see what's moving. That and that. Okay. So next one, I want to make sure that it's seen on camera. Oh, okay. I'll push it back. That moved. So this is the one that we're going to be adjusting now. It's a little off. Okay, that's 90. Then this is the next one. And actually this is pretty close to 90. Right there. Okay, so you can keep cycling and to make sure if you're that's when it's off. So this is that. That's good. That's good. That's good. Okay, there you go. All your servos are 90. You can do your tail servo right now as well. That's actually relatively simple, but it doesn't have to be in this menu. We can get out of this. Okay, on the tail servo, what's important is you have heading hold off. So right now I'm on hold. I put in a negative value, so if you move the tail servo, let me go get an arm so you can see. And by the way, the fly barless control has to be perfectly steady when you do this. So you put a negative, you just put it on rate, and in this case I just threw in negative 85. You see when you let go, it goes back to center. You don't want to do this with rate mode, with heading hold on. I'll show you what happens. So if we have rate mode on, you push it, it kind of it doesn't really go back to center. But if you take off the heading hold, there. See, so with the servos, some people sub-trim them on the rate. There's really no centering on the B-Stacks, on the AR-7210 when mounting. Some people do sub-trim on the radio if it's that off. In this case, it's not that far off, so I wouldn't even worry about it. It's very close to 90. Okay, so that's it. And so my next step is I'm gonna go ahead and mount the 3 servos onto the heli. And actually, after I mount the 3 servos on the cyclic, it also says the next step on the manual is to mount the tail servo using these brackets, which is also pretty straightforward. So I'll go ahead and do that. Oh, don't forget, I just want to highlight again, don't forget to Loctite, clean and Loctite your servo screws. I've seen so many crashes with this. People forget to put Loctite or forget to tighten them. They come from doing the setup like this. I almost did forget. You make sure that you put servo screws nice and tight. And also, don't forget to mount the balls on the servo before mounting them on to the heli, because you'd end up taking them out again to install the balls. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and install. I'm gonna install the balls and then install them on the heli. Okay, so cyclic servos now installed on the heli. Pretty straightforward. Everything just bolts on. It comes with plastic like washers. I wouldn't call them washers, like pieces that you put before you on top. So it's like, let me see if you can see that. There's these plastic pieces where the bolts sit, and I do have the rubber grommets and the brass fittings on there. And when you tighten them down, they get squished anyway, so it doesn't have any slop. I've always ran my servos with the rubber grommets. It's a personal preference. Some people don't run them. I prefer to have them. It just makes everything tighter, and I don't see any reason why. Some people say you might get some movement on the servos with the rubber grommets. I don't. After you tighten them down, everything just cinches and everything's great. So go ahead and install there. Don't forget the washers, Loctite everything. The tail servo is also installed right there. I do want to show or highlight that the bolts to install the tail servo mount does not need the little washers like the other bolts that you did previously. It's straight on, no washer needed. On the manual it shows that there's a washer, but that's not the case because the hole is actually smaller. It was drilled to just have the bolts with no washer. Okay, so this pretty much concludes the frame portion of the build, and as you can see, everything is going along nicely. This is such a high quality kit, and everything goes so well together. So my next video is the tail portion. So I will have that on a separate video, so just click on the next link to continue.